Well, good evening. Welcome to Grover Hill Zion United Methodist Church, Thursday evening devotions from the kitchen table. Tonight I want to just share with you a little bit about Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, verses 12 through 13. And Paul was talking about having feelings of inadequacy and how he overcomes those. And he writes, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do all things through Him who gives me the strength. Paul believed that with his whole heart. I believe that I can do all things through Christ who gives me the strength. What about you? Do you struggle with feelings of inadequacy, thinking that you're not good enough for your spouse or your children or your church or your friends, or even you're not good enough for God? Do you feel too weak or ill-qualified to do a task that God asks you or someone else asks you to do to help them? You know, I'm like you. Most of us have had those feelings at one time or another, and I experience those feelings from time to time, and I put them behind me. Although before I do that, I sometimes ask myself, who am I to speak for God? Who am I to do that? I'm aware of my weaknesses and my own unworthiness, and I'm not better than others, and sometimes I even feel less than others. When someone responds to something I've done, or saying that it encouraged them or it helped them, I know that it's because of God's grace. I don't do those things to shine a light on myself, but to put the focus on Christ. I never compare myself with others. That's a terrible thing. If you compare yourself with others, you'll never ever feel good enough. But those folks you're comparing yourself to, they have those same feelings of inadequacy. I take comfort in knowing I'm not alone in feelings of insecurity. Many characters in the Bible felt this way. Let me just share with you 6 men and women from the Scriptures who feared that they weren't good enough. And, of course, this is abridged. You can find the stories for yourself. Moses, for instance, God selected him to deliver the 10 Commandments, but also to go to Egypt and to bring His people from slavery and bondage in Egypt. And Moses was afraid. He didn't think he was good enough. He said, I don't speak very well. Send someone else. Send someone else. Gideon replied, how can I save Israel when my people are the weakest? And Jeremiah felt inadequate to be a prophet. He believed in God, but he doubted if God would use him or could use him. And the Lord encouraged Jeremiah by saying, don't say, I'm too young. Don't do that. Jeremiah felt he's too young. Listen, I've seen children, young people, who do wonderful things in the name of God. They're not too young. There was a centurion of the Roman army whose servant was sick. He was dying. And he sent word to Jesus to heal his servant. Then, as they were on their way, the servant had died, and the centurion sent word to Jesus. He said, listen, I know what it's like to be in command and to give orders, to be in charge. He said, that's why I didn't even consider myself worthy to come to you. But just say the word, Jesus. Just say the word, and he'll be healed. There was a woman who had a bleeding disorder for some 12 years. That woman, as long as she was bleeding, would have never been considered clean. As long as she was bleeding, she would have been considered unclean. Seeing she couldn't get through the crowd unnoticed, she made it and came to Jesus trembling and touched him. And then she fell down at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she explained why she touched him. And then she told of her instant healing. Her instant healing. And then there was a Samaritan woman. Her past might have caused other women to shun her. If so, she would have come alone to the well to avoid their judgment and their rejection. Whatever was true about her life, she likely had experienced deep pain and feelings of unworthiness. You know, the strongest person admits their weakness. They know their weakness, and they try to strengthen those weaknesses. The greatest person is the one who walks in humility. When we acknowledge we could do nothing apart from God and trust Him to work in us, then we walk in victory. Then we walk in victory. We must turn our eyes from ourselves altogether and focus on the one who's the source of all good things. Then we give Him all the glory. God received the glory from the great acts of Moses and Gideon. He was the one who spoke through the prophet Jeremiah. He healed the bleeding woman and the centurion's servant. He transformed the Samaritan woman. He showed His glory through each one, and they found their strength and identity in Him. We also can find our strength and identity in Him when we trust Him. When we trust Him. Let me just share with you some folks too, because of their belief. Some more modern day folks. Only two of them, and I'll make this very brief. I don't know if you remember this guy or not. He was a professional baseball player by the name of Jim Abbott. Can you imagine that? He was a pitcher. He had one arm and a stub on the other arm. But wow, could he throw that baseball. He could really throw that baseball. He was one of the few players that was never sent down to the minor leagues when he began playing ball. He played for California and Chicago and the New York Yankees and the Cleveland, he pitched a no-hitter against with the Yankees against the Cleveland Indians in September the 4th, 1993. You know, he eventually went to the National League playing with the Milwaukee Brewers. In the National League, pitchers have to bat for themselves. There's no designated hitter in the National League. He went to bat 21 times and had 2 hits. Batting one-handed. One-handed. Can you imagine that? The last player I'll show you, then I'll close this, is that short guy there. His name's Muggsy Boggs. Okay, he played professional basketball in the NBA. 5'3" tall. You know, they said he could never do it, but he did it. He was good at dribbling, and he had great passing skills and speed. So over a 14-year career he played. He played with Washington, Charlotte, the Golden State, the Toronto Raptors. He could pass and score and even block shots. They say he blocked 39 shots. One of those shots he blocked was from Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing. You think those folks, because of their infirmities, if you will, because of their disabilities, they weren't like other people? in their field. You think they felt inadequate? They did. They put their trust in God and they overcame those inadequacies. And you can too. You can too. When you focus on Jesus. Yeah. Well, God bless you and have a great week.